In this video, I'll be talking about my most wanted Hasbro Marvel Legends action figures. So the way this list is going to work, I'll be going from my least wanted to most wanted, and how likely they are to be made or released. I will also be going over what are the closest bodies they can reuse, and what other characters can reuse any newly sculpted parts or accessories. Because at the end of the day, we know Hasbro rarely makes new tooling without at least one other character in mind. Now this video in particular is going to be going over my most wanted comic book action figures, and in the near future I'll be going over my most wanted MCU figures, as well as my most wanted animated / video game figures. Now right off the bat, I know my list is probably not what everybody wants, especially the last figure on this list. It is one that I know for a fact we will not be getting, but I did like the story of that character, so I had to include him on my list. But either way, let's go over my most wanted figures. Now the characters you see in front of you are some honorable mentions. Some of these I can see being made, while others might be a little too complicated for Hasbro to make. Uncle Ben is just your standard Marvel Legends buck with a new head. And if they do want to get gruesome, they can include a head with his eyes closed. Stegoron should be a newly sculpted Build-A-Figure, if they ever do decide to do a Build-A-Figure for a Spider-Man wave. Swarm should be a new body with texture all over, obviously a cloak and a new head sculpt as well. Stunner can reuse the She-Hulk body, or even use the Titania body. It does seem like they are doing every single Spider-Man character, and she would make a fine addition to any Spidey shelf. Spider-Hulk, I could just see them putting on the Caliban body, and then just painting the rips onto said body. Punisher just needs new forearms and a new belt piece on the new Punisher body. We already have Daredevil and Elektra from this story, so I do see them making him in the near future. Yellow Jacket should be on the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man body. I'm actually surprised they haven't made him yet, especially when the Giant Man HasLab was being made. Man Spider should be on the new 6-arm black costume Spider-Man body, since all they would have to do is make new arms, a new head, and some new calf pieces. And now let's get on to my most wanted. So the first figure I want to talk about is Annihilus. The reason he's the first figure I'm going to talk about is because I think this figure will be made in about 1 to 2 years. Mainly due to the fact that Marvel Select canceled theirs because, Diamond Select Toys went out of business. The way I think this figure will be released is through the made-to-order system, just like the 97 Sentinel, Dragon Man, and X-Men 97 Apocalypse. So this is one I do see being around that $80 price point, just due to the fact that he will be quite big, and hopefully it comes with interchangeable heads, hands, and his staff, along with his wings. And obviously he would have to be an all-new sculpt. Another reason is because the older figure has gone up in value to around $60, and Hasbro likes to remake or re-release figures like that, so that way that money goes to them. Additionally, there is a current Marvel game called Marvel Cosmic Invasion, where if you look it up, Annihilus is pretty much front and center on all the posters. So for me, it makes sense for them to want to advertise that game by making this figure, just like they did with the SDCC Snap video game tie-in with Sauron, Rogue, and Shaun of the She-Devil. It is not confirmed, but it is pretty much guaranteed, like about a 95% chance, I'd say, just for the fact that there is a game, along with the old Build-A-Figure being outdated, as well as the Marvel Select one not being made, which just means there is an open market now, more than there has ever been for an Annihilus. That is the reason why he is so high on my list, because I do think he will be getting made in about 2 years. Now for the next set of figures, they are all part of a team, that being the Serpent Society. Now we do have about 7 figures from this team, with one of them even being rumored for an update in 2026. Now there are 6 figures in particular I really want to add to my collection, the first being the female character of Anaconda. Now she would have to be an all-new sculpt. At first I was thinking she can reuse the She-Hulk body, or even those Titania thighs, but Anaconda is usually thicker than both of those ladies. This figure would have to be a new sculpt mainly for the arm, and in a perfect world, they would be twice as long as the Walgreens Mr. Fantastic, because she usually wraps both of her arms around her enemies to capture them. The next character would have to be at least 50% new sculpt, and that is the character of Bushmaster. Now his upper body can easily be reused from the Vulcan mold, while his lower body would have to be a newly sculpted articulated tail. I did look up other characters they can reuse that tail for, because again, Hasbro are more likely to make a new part if they can at least reuse said part for another figure. And the only character that I've seen is the character of Glowworm. So the only way this would work is if they make a blank tail and then paint on the details, which would suck, but if that's how I have to get this figure on my shelf, then so be it. As for the next 4 figures, I just put these into 2 packs, so that way we could just get them done, and we would have pretty much everybody on this team, or at least the ones I personally want. The first 2 pack would consist of Black Mamba and Rattler. Black Mamba can easily just reuse the torso piece from the recent Black Widow figure, with some newly sculpted arms and legs, depending on what version they go with. I prefer the one with the thigh-high green boots, but knowing Hasbro, they would probably go with the easier option with less newly sculpted parts. And she would have to come with at least 1 snake that you can wrap around her arm, body, or legs. Rattler, in my opinion, should be on a Venom type mold, preferably an all-new sculpt, but they can easily reuse the Venom body along with a new tail piece, and then probably just a rubbery overlay that they can put onto his chest and stomach area. The next 2 pack would include Death Adder and Princess Python. Now, a Death Adder can easily be put on a smaller body, most likely the Sunfire body, which I personally hate, but it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting a newer mid-sized body anytime soon. All they would have to do is add a new tail piece, or reuse the Blackheart Build-A-Figure tail, and obviously a new head sculpt. At first I was thinking they can reuse the Triton body, but that figure's legs have sculpted lines on the sides, so unless they retool it, it will probably not work. Princess Python, on the other hand, is quite simple, just due to the fact that they will probably just paint on the fishnets on her arms and legs, but she would obviously have to come with a python. It is literally in her name and how she uses her ability, so I don't know how they would do that in terms of reuse. They could reuse the lower portion of Bushmaster and then sculpt a new upper part. However, I think that lower torso is too thick and it might look weird, and the best option is to do a newly sculpted articulated snake. She is a good pick, mainly due to the fact that you can also put her on your Spider-Man shelf, so she is playing double duty. Now the price point on these can vary. The 2 packs will be around that $50 to $60 price point, but if they do add a lot more new than I am expecting, I can see them wanting to charge an even higher price point. As for Bushmaster and Anaconda, I can see them being around the $35 to $45 price point, which can be worth it if they do add all those newly sculpted parts, and one can dream. But who knows if we will ever get any of these characters, because they will be quote unquote too complex for Hasbro to want to make, and there is not a lot of reuse potential with these figures other than re-releasing them in 2 packs, or maybe a Serpent Society 5 pack where you're re-releasing previous figures to reuse these molds. This next character already had a release back in the age of windowless packaging, and that character is none other than Gorr the God Butcher. Now yes, we already had this figure. Well, most people do. I don't. I did not buy this figure because it was just so lame, and I did not want that figure on my shelf, and I would just rather wait for a new one. I was actually waiting to see if Marvel Select would make one, but obviously they are no longer with us. I was originally thinking they can reuse the Blackheart Build-A-Figure. He is slightly too tall in my opinion, and he has sculpted in spikes and texture all throughout his body, while Gorr is smooth. Obviously they can release this figure by itself, or what I could see them doing is release this figure in a 2-pack with Thor. As a single release, I could see him being around $30 to $35, just like the original one, but if more accurate, like actually having his hook-shaped legs, it would actually be worth that price. Now they can retool that Blackheart Build-A-Figure, or at least reuse his legs, so that way Gorr can actually be accurate. I also think that older Gorr was on the wrong body. He should have been a little thinner, a little more tone in my opinion. And again, Gorr is one of my favorite villains, but I did not want to disgrace him with such a outright disgusting figure. The next character I want to talk about is Hela. Now we did get this character once before in the 2015 SDCC Book of Ashanti box set. That box set is now more than 10 years old, and that figure still holds up. It is such a good piece, and I would like to add it to my collection. However, she is really expensive now. That figure alone can go for about $130 to $180 on the secondary market, and I personally would like to see Hasbro make this figure again. mainly because that first figure was such an amazing figure that I think if they were to do her again with modern technology, she could probably be one of the best Marvel Legends ever, especially if they give her a cloth wired cape, multiple hands, multiple heads, and even raise the sculpted lines. This figure should not be in a box set, but rather a single release, so people like myself can finally add this character to our shelves. Now, if they were going to reuse a body, the only figure that I can see them reusing is the Power Princess mold. All they really need to do is replace the boots. Heck, if they really want to be lazy, they can leave the sculpted lines that are on the torso and just paint over it to make it look like some extra sculpted detail. Now, this figure can just be released in the main line, but most likely this figure will be released through the made-to-order system, mainly due to the fact that the recent Mephisto was also released through this system. And obviously they did release him like that so they wouldn't get any backlash from non-action figure collectors, and I would assume they would do the same thing with Hela, you know, the goddess of hell. Now, if they did release her in this way, I would like to see them make her with Odin's throne, and that way if you do buy this release, you can use the recent Odin figure. And let's be honest, if they were to do her with the Odin throne, they would probably just reissue said Odin, and like that they can just reuse the body again, because at the end of the day, you know Hasbro loves to do that. Now, if that's the case and they make the throne big enough, I could see her being more expensive than the Mephisto, just due to the fact that Odin's throne is much wider. But no matter what way they release her, she should be coming with a cloth wired cape. Now, yes, she can come with her own kind of throne, but I do think the Odin throne would just make more sense to come with her, because that's the only way I can see them doing an Odin throne. So sadly, she would run about $90 to $100. Now, if they did do her as a single release, I could see them wanting to charge anywhere from $35 to $40. Now, for the next figure, we actually did just get him in 2025, but it was a version nobody wanted, and that is of course the character of Mandarin. The version we all want of the Mandarin is pretty much just the old Toy Biz one, but with modern action figure engineering. And obviously he should come with more than one set of hands with the 10 rings sculpted on. The more likely version I could see them doing is from the Iron Man animated TV show, just due to the fact that it is quote unquote less controversial, and we know that Hasbro is scared of any kind of pushback. They will most likely put him on the Iron Man retro card, so out of all the Mandarin versions, this is the one I could see them doing the most. Now, they can also go a different route and do a more modern version by doing what a lot of people in the community have done, and that is to use the MCU Multiverse of Madness Mordo body with the new Mandarin head on it. Another thing they can do is just use those legs from that body and then give them a new shirtless torso, so that way they can just reuse the mold as much as possible. But I do feel like this figure is one step closer to being made, especially since we got that suited version in 2025. But only time will tell, and hopefully we do get him within 1 to 2, maybe even 3 years. Either the version we want, or even the animated version one would suffice. Now, for the price, it would be your standard $27.99 price point. And hopefully this time they actually give him a set of open hands and a set of gripping hands with the 10 rings sculpted onto it. Heck, they don't need to make new fisted hands since they could just reuse the ones they already made. But again, this is one that pretty much everybody in the community wants, especially if it were to come with a cloth robe, but I don't see that happening and looking good for a lower price point. Now, the next character is one I can see them doing, but it is quite unlikely, and that is the character of Graviton. Now, I mainly know this character from the 2012 The Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes TV show, where he does have a completely different look than the one he has in the comics. Now, he did have limited screen time in that show, but he was such a cool character that I want to add him to my collection. Now, I personally don't mind to have the comic book version, as long as I have a version of this character on my shelf. Now, if they were to do this character, I do see them doing the more modern version, and in a perfect world, they would sculpt in all of his lines on his suit. But to be honest, the only new part we would most likely get is a new upper torso, with just his 3 simple circles sculpted onto his chest, and probably just some holes to plug in his cape. And the rest of the figure will just be your standard Vulcan body, nothing too special. They can also do the classic version, which would also be on the Vulcan mold. Now for this version of the character, you would need new forearms and a new upper and lower torso to sculpt in the dots. And that is unlikely for Hasbro to want to do, especially for a character this kind of obscure. It would also be cool to see him have some newly sculpted effect parts to diversify the handful of effects that they just use over and over and over and over again. I feel like it should be a sort of sphere you can wrap around his hand. I think an effect kind of like the one that is on the new cardiac figure for his staff, if you were to just wrap that around the handpiece, would look really cool. And they could probably just reuse that one. But it would be cool if it was new, not a full sphere, but maybe there's a couple holes in there to emphasize the use of his powers. And an effect like that can be used with other cool characters such as Magneto. Now this figure would be a regular $28 release. Nothing special because he is just on the Vulcan mold. The next figure on my list is one that I am 99% sure we will never get. And that is a websuit version of Silk. Now the reason this figure is highly unlikely to ever be made is because all the webs would have to be raised and sculpted onto a body. Now they could just paint over it, but it would look quite flat. While the actual version has many layers of webs, which give it more depth. So painting the webs onto the body would just not look right. To most people, this would just be a weird release. And I also personally don't see this figure selling that well. But I do just like the way the costume looks. It is quite different from your standard Spider-Man costume. This design was one she wore when she didn't have a costume. And it is a design I would like to see in action figure form. Now this figure would just be your regular $28 price point. And probably on a Spider-Man retro card without a Build-A-Piece. Since Hasbro has started to stop doing Build-A-Figures, especially for Spider-Man related characters. Since they know Spider-Man fans will just buy any Spider-Man, and I am sadly guilty of that. But again, I do not see this figure happening at all. Just due to the fact that it would have to be an all-new one-off sculpt, with no possible reuse, except for re-releasing the figure. For the last character, it is one we will all forget about, and that is the character of Forget-Me-Not. I am pretty sure this character has a 99% chance of not being made, just due to the fact that it will not sell at all. The only way I could see them ever releasing this figure is in some sort of 2-pack, 3-pack, or even 5-pack. But other than that, he is very unlikely to be made. And even the figure is just boring. He is just wearing some regular pants and a jacket. Now why would I want this character in my collection when he is just such a forgettable character? It is mainly due to the fact that I like the story of this character. Spoiler warning if you don't know about this character. But he does sacrifice himself to save a young girl from dying, but obviously he does die in the process. The reason I am 99% sure and not 100% is due to the fact that he is a basic sculpt. And you could just put him with your X-Men team since he has technically been there since the very beginning. Now this figure is one I would just probably make a custom of because it is quite a simple design. Now if this figure were to be released single release, it would be your standard $28 price point. But honestly, I see this character being released in some sort of 5-pack. But again, this is my least likely character to ever be made, but it is one of my most wanted figures. So that was my most wanted Marvel Legend figures for Hasbro to make. What do you guys think about this list? Was it a good list or bad list? Do you agree or disagree with my most wanted? Make sure to give this video a like or dislike so I know. And hey, let me know in the comments below what are your most wanted action figures from Hasbro Marvel Legends. If you did stay for this long into the video for whatever reason, thanks for watching. Now fuck off.